The Galactic Council, a grand assembly of the galaxy's most powerful and influential species, prided itself on order, control, and unchallenged authority. They oversaw trade, diplomacy, and even interstellar law with a firm hand, ensuring that every race knew its place within the galaxy's hierarchy. Earth and its humans had long been considered a backwater species, unsophisticated, primitive, and generally irrelevant to the Council's greater plans. They weren't even on the Council's radar, existing somewhere on the fringes as an oddity rather than a concern. One standard galactic cycle, during an important meeting, a blip appeared on the Council's radar. A small vessel was detected within a restricted sector, drifting perilously close to the Council's primary command station. Council members turned their attention to the intrusion with a mix of irritation and curiosity, surprised that any species would be so bold, or so foolish. Sensors confirmed it was human, a single, unremarkable ship that had somehow wandered into this highly restricted zone. The Council members, renowned for their unyielding authority, viewed this as nothing more than an inconvenience. With a few commands, a stern message was crafted, ordering the human vessel to vacate the sector immediately. The message was clear, formal, and left no room for negotiation. They expected obedience. Any species would have understood the tone, and the humans, they assumed, would recognize the threat implicit in the directive. But as they sent the message, the human ship responded with surprising speed. The reply arrived, short and casual, a tone so at odds with Council protocols that several members believed it was a malfunction. The humans thanked the Council for the invitation, and mentioned they hadn't realized they'd stumbled upon an exclusive galactic gathering. There was a hint of humor woven into the message, an almost playful acknowledgement of the Council's authority, yet without a shred of actual fear or compliance. The Council members exchanged puzzled glances, and one of them, Councillor Rail, voiced what they were all thinking. Do they not understand the gravity of their situation? To the Council, any intrusion in their space was an act demanding immediate compliance or harsh consequence. Yet the humans had responded with what seemed like amusement. This wasn't how other species reacted. Most displayed immediate deference, issuing apologies and backing away from Council space with all possible haste. The humans, however, had responded as if they'd stumbled into a neighbor's backyard party. Bemused, the Council sent another message, this one sterner, spelling out the potential consequences for refusing to vacate Council territory. They reminded the human crew of the Council's authority and the protocols every advanced species adhered to. Their directive left no doubt. They expected the humans to leave immediately. The humans, though, answered once again in the same relaxed tone, thanking the Council for their free advice, and adding that they found the Council's offer intriguing but preferred to continue exploring on their own terms. There was a slight chuckle audible in the transmission, a sound that resonated oddly in the otherwise silent Council chamber. Some councillors felt a pang of irritation, perceiving humanity's tone as flippant and disrespectful. Others, however, felt something unexpected, a quiet, grudging curiosity. Very few species would dare use such a tone with the Council, let alone refuse a direct order. It was becoming clear that humans either didn't understand who they were dealing with, or they simply didn't care. Councillor Rail shook his head, puzzled by this unusual behavior, and decided to escalate the matter. If humanity failed to understand the Council's authority, then a more visible show of power might remind them of their place. With a swift order, a small fleet of Council vessels was dispatched to confront the human ship, prepared to surround it and force it out of the sector. The Council ships, imposing and built for both intimidation and defense, moved into formation around the human vessel, positioning themselves as an unmistakable symbol of authority. This was protocol. A show of power to remind any trespassers of the Council's dominance. But as they closed in, the human vessel transmitted another message. This time, the tone was unmistakable, mocking, with the human captain's voice laced with humor. Quite the welcoming committee you've sent, he said, the faint sound of chuckling evident. Didn't realize we were the guests of honor. The Council members were speechless. No species in the history of the Galactic Council had ever dared to mock them in this way. They were accustomed to fear, respect, even awe, but laughter? It was as though humanity didn't recognize the threat, treating the whole affair as a kind of cosmic joke. Counselor Rail's face tightened in frustration, struggling to understand how any species could be so flagrantly defiant. He ordered the fleet to tighten formation, sending a final warning to the humans to comply immediately or face severe consequences. The humans' response was immediate and, to the Council, astonishing. They responded with a simple, "Appreciate the show, but we'll pass on your invitation," before signing off, leaving only silence in the transmission's wake. For a moment, the council chamber was dead quiet, every member stunned by the humans' complete disregard for the power before them. Counselor Rail clenched his fists, ordering the fleet to engage, to force the humans out of the sector. But even as the council ships moved to intercept, the human vessel showed no sign of retreat. Instead, it began to maneuver with a surprising agility, evading their attempts to block it with a grace that seemed inconceivable for such a primitive species. Council members watched in growing shock as the human ship slipped effortlessly through the council's formation, avoiding every attempt to be corralled or detained. The councilors exchanged uneasy glances, each beginning to realize that they had severely underestimated humanity's capabilities. The human ship maneuvered effortlessly, dancing around the council's vessels with an ease that left the council members speechless. Alien commanders watched as the human ship evaded each move, as though it had anticipated their tactics. Every attempt to close in on the humans ended with the council ships forced to readjust, their maneuvers clumsy compared to the human vessel's precision. This was no mere fluke. The humans were displaying a level of skill and technological control that none of the counselors had thought possible. A transmission from the human ship crackled through, casually stating, "Is this really all the famed Galactic Council can muster? We were expecting a bit more finesse." The tone was unmistakable, humor tinged with mockery. Alien command centers went silent, processing the blatant disregard and thinly veiled taunt. This wasn't the reaction of a species awed by the Council's power. The humans weren't just unimpressed, they were enjoying this. Frustration mounting, Counselor Rail issued a command for a full intercept. With a fleet as advanced as theirs, allowing a single ship to evade them was an embarrassment. Council ships surged forward, activating their shielding systems and forming a web of energy fields to trap the human vessel. It was a tactic that had been refined over centuries, designed to corner and immobilize even the most agile ships. Yet, even as the human ship appeared surrounded, it responded by deploying a countermeasure none of the Council ships had ever encountered. The human ship seemed to flicker, its signals scattering as if it had vanished entirely, only to reappear just outside the field's reach. It was as though the human crew had anticipated the trap and preemptively sidestepped it. The Council's command screens flashed error messages as their systems struggled to track the elusive ship. The humans, clearly noticing the Council's confusion, broadcasted another message. "You might want to work on those shields. They're a bit dated." The message echoed through the council chambers, and a wave of tension filled the air. This wasn't just evasion, it was a demonstration of technological superiority. The council, used to asserting dominance through advanced tech, was now being shown up by a species they'd dismissed as primitive. Counselor Rail gritted his teeth as he watched the human ship taunt their fleet with maneuvers that defied conventional tactics. If this was meant to be a show of council power, it was rapidly turning into a humiliation. Realizing they were dealing with something far beyond a simple stray vessel, the Council attempted to cut off the human ship's access to communications. Their systems should have overridden any external transmissions, silencing all unauthorized signals. Yet, in defiance of every protocol, the humans managed to transmit again, their voice carrying an unmistakable sense of amusement. "Impressive attempt. You almost had us," the voice said, barely hiding a laugh. Now fully invested in capturing the vessel, the Council initiated another tactic. They activated a high-frequency pulse designed to disable electronic systems within a set radius, confident this would force the humans to comply. This pulse had worked against every species that resisted, leaving ships powerless and immobilized. Yet, as the pulse spread across the sector, The human ship simply glided through it, unaffected. Council engineers scrambled to make sense of the readings, stunned that their signature tactic had failed. The humans, aware of their confusion, sent one last transmission. "Nice try. Maybe next time." It was no longer just defiance. The humans were playing with them, exposing flaw after flaw in the Council's tactics. Every attempt to subdue the humans was met with laughter and ease, as though they were toying with the Council. Councillor Rail, his pride bruised and patience worn thin, ordered the deployment of a more advanced squadron, the Council's elite force. These ships represented the pinnacle of their technology, designed for precision strikes and capable of handling any known adversary. But as the elite squadron closed in, the humans responded with an unexpected countermeasure. Their ship emitted a pulse of its own, briefly disrupting the Council's sensor systems. In that short window, the human ship seemed to vanish, reappearing moments later behind the elite squadron, positioning itself at an angle that forced the Council ships into awkward, defensive maneuvers. The Council vessels, unused to such evasive tactics from a single ship, struggled to regroup, their once formidable formation now broken and scrambling. The Council members, watching from their command screens, could only stare in disbelief. The humans weren't just avoiding capture, they were leading the Council ships in a game of strategy and precision. It was as though every move the Council made had already been anticipated and countered. For a species assumed to be technologically inferior, humanity was displaying an expertise that left the Council scrambling for answers. Finally, the Council ships attempted a last-ditch effort to encircle the human vessel once more, broadcasting a formal demand for surrender, expecting that the humans would eventually be forced to comply. But instead, the humans transmitted back, their tone light. "Surrender? Oh, we're just getting started. But thanks for the invitation." The Council members froze, unsure if they'd heard correctly. No species, no matter how advanced, had ever spoken to the Council this way. It wasn't just audacity, it was complete, fearless confidence. To punctuate their point, the human ship initiated one final maneuver, executing a speed burst that carried it through the Council's encirclement as if it were nothing more than a suggestion. The ship slipped out of reach and sent one last message. "It's been fun, but we have places to be. Maybe we'll drop by another time." And just like that, the human vessel disengaged, accelerating out of the sector before the Council could even attempt to chase. In the silence that followed, the Council members were left staring at their screens, speechless. They had been bested by a species they had dismissed as insignificant, primitive. The humans had slipped through their most advanced tactics with a sense of humor and defiance that bordered on insult. For the first time in centuries, the Council was forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that humanity was not only capable of resisting their authority, but willing to laugh in its face. The human ship vanished from Council territory as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the Galactic Council members to process the unthinkable. For the first time, they had faced an unknown species that not only disregarded their authority, but openly mocked it, slipping past their most advanced maneuvers and systems with effortless ease. Councillor Rail, visibly tense, convened an emergency meeting with the Council's high command to address what had just occurred. The Council members, an assembly of seasoned strategists and hardened leaders, reviewed the encounter in stunned silence. Each replay of the human ship's movements exposed flaw after flaw in their own tactics, each maneuver highlighting vulnerabilities that had gone unchallenged for centuries. The humans hadn't simply evaded, they had exposed the limits of the Council's abilities, defying every tactic designed to assert dominance. There was no denying it, these primitive humans had bested them. One counselor, struggling to maintain composure, proposed a more aggressive stance, suggesting that they dispatch an armada to Earth to enforce compliance and prove the Council's power. But Councillor Rail hesitated. The humans' casual display of strength had revealed not just technological proficiency but a deeper, more unsettling implication. They had laughed in the face of what was supposed to be the galaxy's greatest authority. They hadn't hesitated, faltered, or shown any sign of fear, a reaction unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. A debate erupted among the councillors, torn between pride and caution. Some argued that humanity's actions were a challenge to the Council's standing in the galaxy, an affront that couldn't go unanswered. Others, however, voiced concern over the possibility of provoking a species that had shown such unflinching confidence. If this single vessel had managed to embarrass their fleet, what more were humans capable of? The Council had always assumed they were the galaxy's ultimate authority, but now, doubts crept in, unsettling even the most stalwart members. Councillor Rail, known for his pragmatic approach, finally addressed the assembly. Perhaps we've underestimated humanity in more ways than one. They didn't just evade us, they demonstrated capabilities that suggest a level of strategic thinking far beyond what we assumed. The room grew quiet, and councillors exchanged wary glances. Rail continued, "If they see our actions as aggression, they may be far less willing to engage diplomatically. And we don't know what else they're capable of." This possibility, that humanity might be more than just a nuisance, left the Council in a rare state of uncertainty. Traditionally, their answer to defiance was swift and unrelenting. A species that failed to comply would face a decisive display of force. But the humans had shattered the usual order, exposing vulnerabilities that left even the Council's strongest supporters shaken. If the humans weren't intimidated by the Council's might, what deterrent could they possibly employ? Meanwhile, news of the incident spread quietly across Council-controlled territories. Word circulated among allied species of a rogue species that had bested the Council's tactics and slipped past their defenses. To many, the notion was thrilling, an underdog species openly defying the galaxy's highest authority, challenging what had long been accepted as unchangeable. For species living under the Council's strict regulations, humanity's defiance sparked a new curiosity. Who were these humans, and how had they managed to evade a force considered invincible? Some allied species leaders, sensing a shift, reached out to the Council for clarification, demanding to know the truth behind the rumors. Council officials, reluctant to admit the reality of their defeat, downplayed the event as a minor incident, a simple misunderstanding with a technologically inferior species. Yet, even as they spoke these reassurances, Council leaders felt a growing unease. They knew the truth: humanity's technology and tactics had surpassed what any minor species could produce. The Council's own reputation was beginning to falter, its authority subtly questioned as whispers of humanity's encounter spread further. In an attempt to prevent further damage to their standing, the Council issued orders to suppress any details of the incident, erasing all public records and forbidding its discussion among military ranks. But even as they tried to bury the story, curiosity about humanity only grew. Allied military officials and scholars began analyzing the little data that had leaked, piecing together a picture of a species that defied the Council's control, a species whose ships maneuvered with a confidence and precision that seemed almost effortless. Councillor Rail, sensing the futility of suppression, suggested a new approach. Rather than risk a potential conflict, they could initiate a covert investigation into humanity's capabilities. They needed to understand this species before making any decision that might spark further escalation. The Council reluctantly agreed, authorizing a small team to study Earth from a distance, to observe humanity and discern if their defiance was an isolated incident or a more profound threat. As the investigation began, the Council scouts observed human space infrastructure, fleets, and communication networks, each discovery more unsettling than the last. Humanity's technology, though not always refined, displayed an adaptability that the Council hadn't anticipated. Human engineers had repurposed and optimized technologies in ways that defied conventional design, crafting systems that were not only efficient but remarkably flexible. Their ships, though modest in appearance, were equipped with defensive capabilities that would be difficult for even advanced fleets to counter. Reports returned to the Council with mounting evidence that humanity was far from a minor player. They were a species with a unique approach to technology and warfare, one that emphasized strategy over sheer power, adaptability over brute force. The Council members, reviewing these findings, felt a growing sense of caution. Their earlier assumptions of human weakness had been entirely wrong, based on outdated observations and a stubborn pride in their own superiority. Humanity's defiance had forced them to confront the uncomfortable truth that they no longer held absolute power. And with each new report, the counselors faced a pressing dilemma. They could continue to ignore humanity, allowing them the autonomy they so clearly valued, or they could attempt to bring them into the fold as equals, a prospect the Council had never considered for any species. But one fact remained clear: humanity wasn't a species that could be ordered or controlled. They were independent, defiant, and perhaps most unsettling of all, unafraid. As the Council sifted through reports on humanity's capabilities, the depth of their underestimation became painfully clear. This wasn't a rogue species overstepping their bounds. Humanity was a force entirely outside the Council's control. Every new piece of intelligence underscored the same conclusion: humanity wasn't bound by the rigid hierarchies that defined other species. They adapted, adjusted, and confronted challenges head-on with a boldness that left the Council at a rare loss for how to respond. Councillor Rail convened a final emergency session, urging the Assembly to take a calculated approach. The humans had exposed weaknesses within the Council that could no longer be ignored. If humanity's defiance were met with aggression, it could lead to open conflict, one the Council was no longer certain they would win. A few councillors, unwilling to relinquish their stance, argued that they should deploy a demonstration fleet to Earth, something powerful enough to send a message. But Rail cautioned against it, reminding them of humanity's response to their previous displays of power. "They laughed at us once," he pointed out grimly. "What makes you think they'd do any differently now?" The Council chamber grew silent, a tense, unspoken acknowledgement hanging in the air. Humanity's confidence was more than bravado. It was a genuine disregard for the Council's assumed supremacy. They didn't fear the Council's authority because they'd found ways to bypass it. Their technology, while not conventionally advanced, was adaptive and unpredictable. Where most species had worked within the frameworks the Council established, humanity had created its own path, one that operated outside the Council's influence. If the Council overplayed their hand, they risked driving humanity into outright opposition, a possibility that no one in the chamber wanted to face. As the debate continued, a proposal emerged from an unexpected source. A senior councillor, known for his unyielding loyalty to the Council's authority, suggested a radical approach. What if, instead of challenging humanity, they sought to engage with them diplomatically? It was a solution the Council hadn't considered, and yet, given the current situation, it was the only one that didn't risk escalation. Reaching out to humanity as equals, however reluctantly, might be the only way to avoid further conflict. Humanity, after all, had shown no desire for conquest, only a firm resistance to being ordered around. This suggestion ignited a heated discussion, but the reality was clear. The Council's usual approach wouldn't work on a species that dismissed their authority with laughter. For the first time in its history, the Council would have to acknowledge a species as an equal rather than a subordinate. The councillors reluctantly agreed to draft a formal message to humanity, a diplomatic outreach that acknowledged their independence and, subtly, their capabilities. It was an act that would challenge the Council's pride, but the alternative was a risk they could no longer afford. The message, once completed, was sent across the galaxy to Earth. It was simple, direct, and carefully worded to convey respect without conceding authority. It invited humanity to an open dialogue with the Council, proposing discussions on mutual terms. There was no demand, no threat, only an acknowledgement of the encounter and an invitation to establish a clearer understanding. For the Council, it was an unprecedented step, a departure from the doctrine that had defined their governance for centuries. The response, when it came, was quintessentially human. In a brief but direct reply, the humans thanked the Council for the polite invitation and expressed a willingness to discuss terms of cooperation at a mutually agreed location. Their reply carried the same casual confidence that had unsettled the Council in the first place, a tone that suggested they weren't impressed but were open to the conversation. The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. Humanity's response made one thing abundantly clear: they would engage on their own terms, and they wouldn't be intimidated. Across the galaxy, rumors of humanity's encounter with the Council continued to spread, evolving into stories that captured the imagination of countless species. The tale of a single human vessel outmaneuvering the Council's best fleets, and leaving with a laugh resonated with those who had long lived under the Council's strict policies. Humanity became a symbol of defiance, their actions a spark that ignited hope in species that had quietly resented the Council's dominance. To them, humanity represented the possibility of independence, a force that had proven the Council wasn't infallible. In the wake of these stories, the Council found itself facing more than just humanity's resistance. Other species began to question, subtly at first but increasingly openly, why they had accepted the Council's authority for so long. If humanity, a species considered insignificant, could refuse to bow, then what was stopping others from doing the same? The Council's control over the galaxy, once ironclad, was now a topic of quiet debate among their own allies. Humanity had unwittingly challenged not just the Council's authority, but the very structure that held the galaxy under its sway. Humanity, meanwhile, continued its exploration of the galaxy, indifferent to the shifting tides they'd set in motion. They hadn't intended to provoke the Council or inspire rebellion, they had simply refused to be ruled. And in doing so, they had left an indelible mark, a reminder that power wasn't absolute, that even the greatest forces could be questioned, even laughed at. In the end, the Council had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humanity had not only disrupted their command but had opened the galaxy's eyes to the possibility of independence. And as the Council watched humanity's influence spread, they realized that things would never return to the way they'd been. The Council had been forced to adapt, to evolve, and to reconsider what it meant to truly lead. And in that evolution, humanity had secured its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as a species that had proven they would never bow to a power that didn't earn their respect.